Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, quickly, I want to just do this video in order to cover some grounds. We have a lot to cover, and the time we have may not, be sufficient for us to cover, the many things that we want to cover. So that's why I'm doing, this pre-recorded videos, right, so that we could finish in the 5 months, all right, that we are supposed to finish. Okay. In the last class, we stopped at creating a VPC. We created two subnets, subnet A and B, and we configured our route table. All right, this one, the public route table, which is connected, all right, to our internet gateway. We did that. Okay, let me just delete this one to avoid any kind of confusion. Okay. Well, I can just leave it. I just created it and then I'll explain what this is. So we created this one. I renamed it again to public route table. And then we saw, that we connected an internet gateway to it. And then we explained what this means. All right. And then associated a subnet A to it. And of course, we created an EC2 instance to test to be sure that indeed instance is able to access the internet, right, using the internet gateway. All right. Now, on the other end, we also have the NAT gateways, which we explained. And just a quick recap, we mentioned that the internet gateway is what allows your services to be exposed, all right, to the public. Okay, you expose your services to the public, but on the other hand, your NAT gateway protects, right, your services from the public. At the same time, it allows your service to access internet, right? So basically, what you can say about the NAT gateway is it shuts the front door, so people are not able to come in into, all right, your services. They are not able to access your services over the internet, right? So that's the front door, all right. But at the back door, your service is able to access the internet. Whereas for the internet gateway, the front door is open, the back door is opened. So people are able to access your resources or your services from the internet. At the same time, your instance is also able to connect to the internet through the back door. But in the case of the NAT gateway, the front door is kind of shut. All right. Only your instance or your services or your resources is able to connect to the internet and do whatever it wants, all right, to do. So that's the difference between the two. All right, so quickly, let's create a NAT gateway. Again, let me remind us that the NAT gateway is not covered under the free tier. So as soon as you're done with the practice, ensure that you delete it right immediately, okay, so that you don't, accrue unnecessary cost. All right. So I'll come down here to NAT gateway. So I'll click on that. And then I already have one here was deleted. So I'll create a new one. So create a NAT gateway. Of course, like we give every other thing a name, so we're going to give this a name as well. So NAT G, right? So let's close that. Now, another thing also you must pay attention to is that your NAT gateway must be created in the public subnet. Now, don't forget, our DevOps subnet A is actually mapped to the route table, which is connected to the internet gateway. So, mapping that route table to the internet gateway suggests, all right, that that particular subnet is a public subnet because it has a connection to the internet gateway. All right. A private subnet, on the other hand, is a subnet that has a connection to the NAT gateway. So how you understand or how you know this is actually from the route table. So if I look at a route table and I see an internet gateway connection, and then I go to the subnet associations, I see different subnets associated to it, definitely I know that those subnets are public subnet. On the other hand, if I see a route table and what I see there is a NAT gateway, all right, and then I see some subnet associated with it, all right, that suggests to me that those subnets attached to that particular route table that has a NAT gateway connection, right, that those subnets are private subnets. Okay, so public subnet are the ones that the front door and the back door is open. Your services can be accessed from the internet. They can also, right, your services can also pull updates from the internet. On the other hand, the ones connected to the NAT gateway, the front door is shut, nobody can come in, all right, through the public internet, all right, but your instances or your resources can access internet resources on the back end. All right, that's just the difference. So here I'm going to choose this one because my subnet A is connected to my route table, and my first route table has an internet gateway connected to it. All right, so the NAT gateway is something that helps you, all right, to connect your resources to the internet without exposing them to the public internet. Okay, so if you are creating a NAT gateway, it must be created in a public subnet. And again, like I said, a public subnet is a subnet that has an internet gateway connected to it via the route table. All right. So the connectivity type is going to be public. All right. That's uh, what your NAT gateway is. I already have an elastic IP address here, but if you want to create another one, you can just click on allocate an elastic IP and then it does the magic. All right, for you. So let me just choose this one that I've already created. Okay. So create. So NAT gateway creating. So right here is telling us it's pending. So we'll go back here. So we can see here that it's showing pending. Okay. Now what I need to do is to go over to my route table. All right, and then I'll create a new route table. So I can name my route table DevOps private, right, RT. Then I choose the VPC. So this is my VPC here. All right, and then I can create my route table. So route table created. So let me see. Now this is the route table that I just created. This is one that I created earlier. Right, this one that I created earlier, I'm going to go to the subnet association and I'm going to remove this association. All right, let me just check and then save. So association removed. All right, now how do we recognize the one we just created? Okay, so this one, let's delete this, let's delete one of them. All right, so deleted. Oops, let me filter on my VPC. All right, now this is my private route table. So I'm going to go to routes. So if you look at it here, we also have the same thing like we have with the public route table. So which means they belong to the same VPC, but in this case, one of them is connected to the internet gateway. So that makes it a public route table. The other one is connected to the NAT gateway. That makes it a private route table. So basically, the subnet associated with this one, all right, this public one, all right, this subnet can be referred to as a public subnet, all right, because they have a connection directly to the internet gateway. On the other hand, subnet associated with this one can be referred to as what a private subnet because their own connection is to the NAT gateway, so they are not exposed directly. So how do we do that? So we go to edit route, the same thing we did for the internet gateway. So 00, and then scroll down NAT gateway, and then names are the same because we have two NAT gateways. All right, so I need to go back and go over to my NAT gateways so that I can get the correct ID. All right, so this is the one that I'm using. This one has been deleted, so that's ADE. Okay, so let's go back there. So route tables, private route tables, routes, edit route. All right, 00, and then you scroll down to NAT gateways. So this is the one we're looking for. So we choose this because if you choose a NAT gate that is not active, what you're going to get is a black hole. Right, that's what you're going to get. So which means it's not working. Right, that particular device is not active. So let's save changes. And right here we see that this is active, so it means that our NAT gateway is up. All right, then we go to subnet associations. All right, edit the association and then attach this one. All right, to it. So which means DevOps subnet A is a is a public subnet. DevOps subnet B, on the other hand, it's a private subnet. So a private subnet in this sense means that that subnet, all right, will not give out public IP addresses. Okay, it's not going to give out public IP addresses. So all the instances created, all right, on that particular subnet will have private IP addresses. So we're going to look at two ways we can connect to instances in the private subnet, right? Because for security reasons, most of your instances will be in the private subnet. You're not going to put your maybe your web server, you're not going to put it in a public subnet, right? That's going to be a huge security risk, right? So your servers, your database, or all of these things will be in your private subnet. Of course, it will have a NAT gateway connected so that you can download updates and fetch some things online on that instance. All right. So we're going to look at two ways. So the first one is the popular Bastion host. All right. So Bastion host means just creating an instance in the public subnet, but of course they share the same VPC. So that way, even though the other one is in a private subnet and this one is in the public subnet, but they are still connected to the same VPC. So the Bastion host will be created in the public subnet, which means you're going to create a Bastion host in the DevOps subnet A, all right, and then from that particular Bastion host, then we're going to authenticate into the DevOps subnet B. All right, so that's just basically, the Bastion those connections. So, and then again, we're going to look at using the Instance Connect endpoint as well. So, Instance Connect endpoint as well. We're going to look at those two options, and then the third one is going to be the Session Manager, which probably is going to be an assignment, right? Okay, for us. So, we're going to find out how to do that by our own self, but I'm going to show us two ways: the Bastion host and then the Instance Connect endpoint that you can use to connect to your instance. All right. So now we've connected this. So we have our routes connected to NAT gateway, subnet translation, everything is done. So let's go over here to our instance page. Okay. So I'll click on launch instance. So uh, so we're going to do the Bastion host first. All right. So let's see how that works. So let's call this EC2 Bastion. Okay. So I'm going to create an EC2 instance in the public subnet, and then I'm going to create another one in the private subnet. Okay. So let's just stick with the Amazon Linux 2 AMI, T2 Micro, my key pair. Where is it? Okay, so this one. All right. So I'm going to choose the DevOps VPC. So I'm going to create this one in the DevOps subnet A. I'm going to choose an existing one, security group, and then default, and then I'm going to launch that. All right. So that's the first one. Okay, so that's there. So let's launch the second instance right now. So we're going to call this EC2 private. Okay. So in the private subnet, it's not going to be exposed. We're going to use the same key pair. Okay, edit, demos class VPC, but this time around it's going to be in the subnet B. Okay, so you can see that public IP address has been disabled, so we're still going to use the same security group, and then we'll launch our instance. All right. So we have let me filter by, oops. Let me do the filtering by instance state. State equals running. Okay, so I just want to look at the running instance. So the two of them are running. So if I click here to the Bastion one and I click on connect, I can click on instance connect. So it has a public IP address, as you can see. So the connect is going to appear here. If I choose this one, it won't work now because I have not. I don't. I have to create an endpoint before this works. So we're going to see that later on. So let's just go right with the Bastion host, and then we look at this other option uh, later on. So let's connect. All right. So it's basically everything works. So this is my public EC2 instance. It's connected to the internet gateway, so that will work. So you can see it has a public IP and it has a private IP address. So on the other end, if I go over here to this one and I go to connect, it's telling me this instance does not have a public IP address, so I cannot use Instance Connect browser-based client. All right, it's not going to work. So you can see that here the connect is grayed out. So the question is, how do I make the connection from the Bastion host to this particular EC2 instance? How do I do that connection? Okay, all right, pretty simple. It's something we learned in our Linux class. Now, don't forget, when we created both instances, we attached the key pair to both of them. All right, so the key pair is, if you go to security, okay, oops, let's see, details, scroll down a bit. All right, now under the key pair here, it is the key pair that we attach to both instances, right? So both of them are using this key pair. So which means if I want to authenticate into this private EC2 instance, I need to be able to have access to the key pair, and that key pair must also be available on this particular machine in order for me to authenticate to it, because the only thing it has is just a private IP address. So you can see it only has a private IP, there's no public IP address, all right, there's no public DNS, okay? So it's only private IP address. Now, if I copy this address and I go over here and I do the command ping and I paste that IP address, right? So let's see, oops, and paste, paste, okay? And I do a ping. It's not going to. I'm not going to get any response, right? You know why? Okay, that's pretty simple. And the reason I'm not getting any response is because on the security group for this particular instance, I don't have the ICMP protocol turned on. So if you look at the security group, I only have SSH, port 80, and then RDP turned on, all right, in the security group. So if I want to allow, ping request, I want my instance to respond to, ICMP protocol, which is just your normal ping. That you use ping, right? In a normal work environment, if you're troubleshooting, maybe a system is not responding, it's not connecting to the internet. One of the first things that you do is to do run the ping command just to see if you're going to get any feedback, all right, from that particular instance. So let's go to the security group. Under the inbound rule, let's try to enable the ICMP protocol, which is responsible for the ping. So I'm going to choose this one, all ICMP protocols, all right, and then from anywhere, and then I can save my changes. Okay, so let me check that again. Edit, all right, all ICMP, okay, oops, so save. So it's been saved. So let's call up this thing again and let's see if, all right, now you can you see the name of the protocol? So ICMP, so that's responsible for that ping. So now technically it tells us that the two systems are connected, but then I still need to connect to it using SSH, right? So that key pair that was attached to the private instance, I need to find a way to bring that key pair, all right, into this particular host in order for me to be able to, all right, use um, that keypad to connect, all right, to my instance. I can't connect using IP address. I have to connect using the same keypad. So what do I do? On my system here, I have the downloads. So if you look at this place, so the command is right here. So if I click on the bit, this is the key that I'm looking for. So I'll copy. And now when you're copying, you must pay attention to this name. This name must be exactly the way it is here. That is how you should create it, all right, in your EC2 instance. So what do I do? So I just simply create, all right, I just do VI, okay, and then free, name again, free class key dot pen. So you can see that it's all copied and free, all right, free class key, all right, dot pen. So the name must match exactly the name here, okay? The name must match what you have right here. Okay, so you must pay attention and take note of that. All right, so let's enter. So hi to insert, and then I can paste my key here. So my key has been pasted, and then I do my WQ. Okay, that's capital, so that's in small letters, and then I save that. Now if I do ls, so I can see my key pair. If I do ll, I can see here that this key has some kind of write access, and of course my EC2 instance is not going to allow that. Okay, It's going to want me to, okay, remove this write access. So how do I do that? So I just hit chmod 400. It's just allowing read access, right, to this particular key. Okay, so enter. So if I do LL, I can see that only read access is available right there. So if I want to connect to, so I'm trying to back out. So if I want to connect to this my private instance, um, I need to get a private IP address. But better still, I can click on connect and then go to SSH client, and then I can copy this example that I have here. So that makes things easy. So just copy that and paste here, all right, and then enter. So it's asking you, are you sure? So you say yes. Okay, so you can see that we are connected to that instance, all right, in the private subnet. Okay. If I do my yum install by httpd -y, you can see that indeed my instance actually has internet connection. The only thing is it can be accessible, all right, publicly. Okay, then there's a backdoor, all right, of access. Okay, so that's the Bastion post. Now there's an assignment again I'm going to give us here. The assignment is this: we only have one VPC that we are playing with, right? But in a production environment, you're going to have more than one VPC. So I want to give us a simple assignment, which I'm going to put in the Slack channel and on the LMS platform, right? And the assignment is you're going to create two VPCs, all right, with different CIDRs. And then you are going to have instances in each of the VPCs, right? You're going to deploy one instance in one of the VPCs, and then another instance in one of course, you're going to have to create subnet, all right, in each of the VPCs. Okay. Now you're going to find a way to connect, all right, the instance in VPC A, for example, to all right to VPC B using what you call a VPC PM. So you're going to connect the two VPCs together so that resources in VPC A can communicate with resources in VPC B. All right, so that's one assignment I'm going to give to us. Okay, so you create two VPCs, and then I'm going to share the documentation for the VPC plan with us. I want us to go through it and then see if it's something you are able to do on your own, just going through the documentation. So that's one assignment, and then the second assignment is going to be the SSM. All right, connecting to your instance using SSM instead of SSH and all of that. Okay, so we have done the Bastion O, so we can see how you can use Bastion OS to connect. So if I can exit from here, if I'm done with the instance, then I go back to, all right, my other system. So that's for the Bastion host. Now let's look at the endpoint, all right, which is the EC2 instance endpoint, which is another option that you can use to connect to your instance. Now, what are we going to look? We're going to look at that in two ways. So we're going to look at that by creating a Linux machine. So we already have one Linux machine. Okay, so we already have one Linux machine. So we're gonna be using the Linux machine that we created in the private. So we're gonna be using this one, all right, for our instance connect endpoint. And then we're gonna create a Windows machine. I want to show us if you have a Windows machine, now you can use that in Windows instance endpoint to also connect your Windows machine. Because don't forget, the endpoint also, there's no public IP address, it's only a private IP address, all right? And somehow you can create an endpoint that can, it creates some kind of tunnel that you can use to connect, all right, to your instance. So I'm going to show us with how to do that with Windows and with a Linux instance. Okay, so let me close this and let's delete, all right, this Bastion host. So it's done. So we're not gonna need it anymore. All right, so let's just stick with this private instance. Now, before you create the endpoint, you must make sure that your security group has SSH, all right, opened. The port SSH protocol is connected and the port is opened, all right. And then if you're connecting with a Windows instance, you must ensure also that your RDP port is also open. So, for example, excuse me, in my security group here, I have my SSH open, I have my RDP also opened. Okay, so I have the two ports opened up. All right, so let's go with this one. So we're going to see how to connect this private instance using the instance. connect endpoints. But before we do that, we have to go over back to our VPC, and then we'll go over to endpoints. So you click on this place, all right, and then you create an endpoint. Okay, so you can call this EC2 private endpoint, right? And then we choose this EC2 instance connect endpoint as what we want to use. All right, so we select the VPC, so DevOps class. Excuse me. So you select your security group. So the subnet, of course, it has to be a private subnet. Okay, and then you create the endpoint. So you have to wait a while for the status to become available. All right, you have to wait a while for that status to become available. Okay, so while we're waiting for that, let's come over here and let's create another instance. This time around, a Windows instance. Okay, so that's the Windows and endpoint. Right. So Windows. Okay, so I want my system to be a bit fast, all right, my Windows system to be a bit fast. So I'm going to go outside of the feed here. I'm going to choose a T3 medium, all right? So T3 medium, so I'm going to choose that. I don't want it to be lagging any. So let's choose this one and then edit. So DevOps class VPC, nope, subnet B. Okay, so that's the private subnet. So the public IP address is not available. So select an existing security group. So you choose that and then select it. So once that is done, you can launch your instance and then, all right, so the instance endpoint is also running. So let's verify again by instance state. So the state equals running. All right, so we have two. So this one and this one. So we want to see how we can use the VPC instance connect endpoint to connect to this two instances, which of course are in the private subnet. They are not publicly accessible. All right. And the good thing about this instance, all right, connect endpoint is particularly for the Windows instance. You can actually connect using your normal hard DPU, all right, locally. Okay, but I'm going to show us how to do that. So basically, this option actually helps to enhance the security of your instance. Okay, it ensures that your instance is secure and you are the only one who can access that particular instance. Okay, so this one is still pending. So while that is pending, you can actually go over here to do a few configurations. So if I want to use the instance connect endpoint with my Linux instance, I can go to connect and then I go to instance connect and then I choose this option. Okay. The username is of course easy to user, so you can leave all this by default. And then the endpoint, all right, is still creating. Okay, so in progress, you can see that state create in progress. So let's wait a little bit for that endpoint to come online. All right. So now it's available. Okay, so it's available. So if we go back here so let's refresh this page. Let's come here. So let's go here. Let's come back. So let's just refresh this page. All right. So choose this option here, and then you can see. So you choose that, and then you click on connect. All right. So you click on connect. We have the connection right here. So it's still using SSH. And if you look at the connection type, it tells us clearly that it's using the right instance connect endpoint. If you look at it, it's using the instance connect endpoint, so EICE. Okay, so pay attention to that. So if you look at it here also, we only have the private IPs, no public IP address, all right, whatsoever. All right, but of course, we're still able connect. So if I do sudo hi and I try to do yum, so let's do yum install. Okay, let's just say zip. You can see now that that's already installed. So that tells us that the internet is kind of working. Okay, so let's do this one. Okay, let's see that the internet is working. So the endpoint is actually all right working. Okay, so that's a good one. Okay, now so that's for the Linux. So let's talk about the Windows instance. All right, which is this one. So if you go to connect, so here under the HRDP client, you have to get a password. Right, so click on get password, upload your private key. It's right here. Okay, and then you can decrypt the password. So I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here. All right, so I'm going to paste it there. Now I'm going to also download this file. All right, I may not even need to download it anyways. You don't need it, so let's just leave it. You can download it, but you can leave it. It's not necessary for you to do that. Now, what we need to do is that you can open up your git bash, and then you're going to run, all right, this command. Okay, as I have it here, excuse me. So this particular command is what we're going to run, which you can actually find in the AWS documentation. But then, before you run that command, you must do one thing. What is the one thing you must do? You must do your AWS configure. So, which means you must provision AWS account, all right, in the terminal. So, which means you need to generate an access key and a secret key ID. So how do you do that? Because now what you want to do now is that you want to programmatically, all right, interact with your AWS platform. All right. So this time around, you're not doing anything via the console. All right. In order for you to be able to use the RDP, like locally using the Instance Connect endpoint, you have to configure, all right, your terminal, okay, with your more like a username and a password. But in the AWS, in the case of AWS, it's called access and secret key. Okay. Now, how do you get it? There are two ways. You can come here under this place and then go to security credentials. All right, and then okay, all right. So I was wondering. So if you scroll down here, you'll find all right this point here. So you can click on create access key. You can choose this option. All right, command line interface, and then understand, and then you can click on next. All right, give it a name here, and then create access key and secret key. So once access key and secret key has been created, you have to copy both keys, and then you come back here to do AWS configure. So you press enter. So it will ask you for your access key ID, so you provide it. It will ask you for a secret key ID, you provide it. Then your default region, it will also ask you, you provide it, and then this one you can leave it as is and then enter. So that way you have provisioned your terminal, right, to now. So which means with the command we just entered, we can actually interact with our AWS account programmatically. All right. So we can interact with our AWS account programmatically, all right, using the CLI. Okay. Now the AWS configure may not work. So if you're using Windows, go to Chocolati, all right, just go to Chocolati here. Go to Chocolati community packages, and then right here type AWS CLI here, and then you can copy it and install it from here. But of course, if you're using other versions, maybe like Mac OS, we got it covered. So you can just do AWS CLI download, right? And then this one, and then scroll down and choose the OS, all right, that you're using. So if you're using Mac, just click on Mac, and then follow the instruction that you have here, and you'll be good. So once you install the CLI, then you can run the AWS configure command. You can run this configure command, put in your access key, all right, your access key, your secret key, your region, and and you're good to go. So let's configure this so that we can connect with our Windows instance. So I'll do the first one, enter. So the second one is the instance ID. Okay, so I need to change this value, all right, to match my instance, all right, ID, so which I can get from here. So this one, so I just copy this, copy, and then replace that here. All right, so copy that, copy, paste, enter. So the next thing is to specify the remote port. So I can actually just type that right in, remote port. Of course, 3389, so it must be opened up, all right, in your security group. So that's the RDP port, so that's the remote port. And then you want to tie it to a local port, okay? You want to tie it to a local port. So in our case, it can be any port actually. It can be any port, any high ports, right? So I can choose 3500, okay? And then I press and enter. Now, let's see what will happen. So it's telling me listening for connection on port 3500. So here I can open up my remote desktop connection, right? And then I can do localhost, or I can expand this, and then I can do localhost 3500. Okay? That's how you connect. So localhost 3500. So that this is already listening. Now don't forget that the 3500, of course, on my system has been tied to the remote port. So the remote port is 3389, which is a HTTP port because I'm connecting to a server online. So I need to specify the port. But locally, I need to generate, all right, some kind of port number to map to the remote port number. Okay. So localhost 3500, this one, I can actually just specify the name is administrator, right? And then I can click on connect. So if you watch this area, see what happens. So connect, it's telling me accepting the new TCP connection. Um, in order for me not to, all right, so, okay, let's leave it at this. So the password, I copied it already. So the password is this. And then paste. Let's click on OK. So you can see now that it's telling me blah blah blah. But of course, don't pay attention to all of that. So just click on yes. So accepted it is a connection open website socket tunnel. So you can see that I'm actually on my system. Okay. So if you look at that, I'm actually connected to my EC2 instance, my Windows machine. So it looks more like it's something that is hosted locally. But of course, that's the point. That's the privilege, or that's the benefit of using the Instance Connect endpoint. All right, this kind of works more like your workspaces, okay? Because your workspace is also is connected to your NAT gateway. It's not open to the public, but then there's this workspace client that you download on your system, all right, that you can use to connect to your workspaces. So even though your workspace is not in the public subnet, all right, it's still able to create a tunnel, all right, using that particular application, and then you're able to connect to your instance, all right, in that private. So if you look at it here, this is the instant ID. Look at the private IP. Look at the public IP. No public IP address, but of course, with the configuration that we have done, we've created a tunnel. All right, okay, on our system. Okay, and then using the AWS configure, we provisioned the tunnel already. So that tunnel has helped us to uh, right, using the instance endpoint. So the endpoint is connected to the NAT gateway, the NAT gateway is connected to the internet gateway. So by so doing, all right, you are able to connect to your instance online without having, all right, a public IP address. Okay, so that's how it works. So if you go to the browser and you open it up, of course, you should be able to, all right, you should be able to browse on the system. There's internet access already. All right, do it in that gateway, but then still, so let's just do speed test. Okay, all right, so you can just do some kind of speed test and accept it. All right, so click in this. Consider the speed is now. If you look at the speed test we're doing, there's a public IP address that is showing up here. So the question is, we don't have a public IP address. Our instance is connecting to a private IP address. So where is this public IP address coming from? Okay, um, where's it coming from? You can see the speed is actually about 1 gigabit. all right, or bandwidth. That's really good. Now, this public IP address, how do we explain this? Because we're using Instance Connect, and Instance Connect is using, all right, a private IP address. So how do we explain this public, all right, IP address that we have here? Now, remember, when we created our NAT gateway, we actually allocated an elastic IP address, all right, to our NAT gateway. So that elastic IP is what you are seeing here. How do I know that is true? Okay, so let's go back to the VPC. Let's scroll down. Let's go to elastic IPs. And let's find out if indeed, okay, can you see 3.10.10.93? Does that correlate with what we have? 3.10.10.93. Okay, so that's the IP address of the elastic IP that we generated that was mapped, all right, to our NAT gateway. Okay, all right, it was mapped to our NAT gateway, right? So that's the IP address that we are seeing. So if you look at it critically to find you're connecting with a private IP address, but then your NAT gateway has a public IP address. So it's just basically making use of that public IP address. But in this case, all right, it's tunneling your private traffic through, all right, that public IP address. So you don't need a public IP. Of course, your private IP address can go over, all right, the public IP address, and then you're still able to connect to your instance. So, like I said, the endpoint connection is something similar to when you have a workspace configuration or a workspace system in your AWS account. There's the workspace client that you download, and then right with that workspace client, even though your workspace is not on the public subnet, with that application, you can still connect with your workspaces. So it's the same thing with your Instance Connect endpoint with the Windows system. So that's all that I want to share with us. So in class on Wednesday, we're going to look at other things like your EFS and then the different types of the EBS that we have, all right, and then how you can increase your drive size and all of that, okay, so that you can move as fast as possible. Okay. All right. So thank you so much. The video is going to be available. Then after the class on Wednesday, the assignment will also be there. All right, for us to work on. So creating two VPCs and then using VPC peering to connect them together so that resources in both VPCs can communicate with themselves. And then the other one, which is using the SSM, all right, so that if I would want to use this session manager, so we're going to find out how to use this, all right, to connect to your instance as well. So I've taught us the Bastion host and then I've taught us the Instance Connect endpoint. All right, so guys, see you on Wednesday. Thank you so much for your time. All right.